Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Congressman, good morning to you.
Hey, fellas, good morning. How are you?
We're doing great. How was the weekend?
It was good. You know, it's a little chilly. I'm coming back to Illinois today, and I hear it's even colder there than it is in D.C.
Oh, yeah, you want to make sure you're hanging around for Wednesday, you know, that single-digit high and all that. Some nice wind chill worked into it. It'll make Washington seem even more welcoming.
Yeah, I'll be there. And, you know, I have a bunch of stuff scheduled on Wednesday. I might just cancel it and hang inside and cry all day long.
Yeah, you sound like the sort of guy who'd do that. Yeah, right.
Hey, right, just be in the fetal position.
Hey, got to ask you about the authorization for military force.
Yeah. Well, the president, as you guys know, put out his own proposal, and this proposal would, in essence, limit the ability to do this to 3 years, and it would say that he cannot do offensive, enduring combat operations, which basically implies ground troops. Well, I'll tell you, first off, I think it's unconstitutional that the president would limit his options that way and make Congress culpable on that. I think the president is trying to make Congress own his limited strategy. I've been very critical, and many, in fact, have been very critical of the president, saying that, in fact, he doesn't have a plan, it's too limited, and he's not fighting the wars you should fight a war. So I put out a HJ Res 33, which is authorization of the use of military force, which uses all the president's language, but it takes away the 3-year restriction and the restriction against ground troops. So it basically gives the president the authority to destroy ISIS with whatever means is necessary. And I think that's what Congress should be doing.
And I read someone over the weekend saying that the proposal as is might in fact be unconstitutional. You think that's correct?
Yeah, that's right. I think if you look at now the president's proposal, if you look at his proposal, he basically would limit himself. Now, the Constitution clearly states that it's the job of Congress to declare war. So we can basically declare that a state of war exists, and then, of course, fund operations and things like that. The president's job is now to take the Congress recognizing that a state of war exists and then to figure out how to win that and how to execute that war. That's what a commander-in-chief does. So by the president, in essence, giving Congress, for the first time ever, by the way, Congress has never passed a use of military force authorization with limits on it, to give to Congress to say, here, take away my power to be commander-in-chief by limiting what I can do, violates the very spirit of the Constitution of the United States, which is nothing new for this president.
And you believe that the way it's structured now as well will hamstring future presidents as well?
Well, that's it. You look at it this way. The president's going to be president for 2 more years. So thankfully, just 2 more years. I wish it was less. But this authorization for the use of military force gives a 3-year timeline, which means when the next president comes in, hopefully a Republican, and he makes the determination that he needs to go after ISIS, maybe it takes ground troops, maybe it takes whatever offensive, enduring operations are, he's now limited for a year by this use of force. He can't go in. And secondly, in 3 years, if we go to reauthorize this thing, what's going to happen if there's, if the politics is different? We can't allow war and fighting war to be subject to the politics of the moment, because if you look back when the surge in Iraq happened, and unfortunately Obama threw the surge success away, but when the surge was happening, there's nobody in Congress, not many, that would have voted to reauthorize the Iraq war in order to allow the surge to occur. And thankfully that use of force had continued on so that they didn't have to do that, because the politics of the moment can be very different, and a president should not be subject to that when fighting a war.
Congressman Adam Kinzinger with us from Illinois' 16th District. It's Riley and Scott here on WROK. So over the weekend, Congressman, we have Christians beheaded in Egypt. We have another terror attack in Denmark. Ostensibly, it appears as if it were targeted at one of the individuals on the ISIS hit list. We have shots fired at a synagogue in Denmark. We have all of this taking place. Francois Hollande, the president of France, talking with the Egyptian president, trying to coordinate these efforts. Our president golfing in Palm Springs through the weekend. I know we've talked about this before. What are the consequences, though, of both perhaps operationally and also the perception of the president being so disconnected from this fight?
It has a very big impact. Being in his office taking selfie stick pictures, which, by the way, I hope the selfie stick dies. But regardless, walking around being stupid at a time when, we find out that our American is killed. And, I mean, it sends a very bad message. And the president seems aloof, disengaged. He does not seem to me like he wants to be president anymore. And he definitely doesn't seem like he wants to be a president that destroys the ISIS problem. He more wants to be a guy that manages it. I can say he ended 2 wars in the Middle East. I think it's everybody who, and sometimes I hear people say, like, in essence, they make the broad brush about there's no good Muslim regimes out there. Think of it this way. Egypt is a Muslim country, and 21 of their Christian minority were killed in Libya, and they are launching strikes now to protect their own people because they consider Christians and Muslims the same, in essence, under Egyptian law. That's the kind of example that people need to see happening, and frankly, I think the United States should be working with the Egyptians to attack ISIS wherever they exist, including in Libya.
Well, it sure seems like there's a lot of people and a lot of nations out there that are getting the same idea. You got Jordan, of course, over the last couple of weeks, and their king kind of really setting himself apart by quoting Clint Eastwood. And you've got what's going on as far as Egypt goes and all that, and you got our guy golfing.
Yeah, well, I saw a great kind of internet picture where it had a picture of Barack Obama on a bicycle with his helmet on, and his bicycle helmet, and then a picture of the Jordan king, with his military fatigues on. And it's like, do you spot the difference here? I mean, the president has got to understand that not just pulling the trigger on a few airstrikes, although I support airstrikes, but it's as much, a president. I mean, George W. Bush, in fact, during the War on Terror, I think about a year or 2 into it, realized that the golf sent the wrong message, and he quit golfing. And would never be seen golfing because he simply didn't do it. He said at a time when Americans are engaged overseas, the commander-in-chief should not be out golfing, and he quit doing it. So, I mean, it's got a huge vision. This president doesn't understand that. He doesn't know. I mean, look, he's not somebody that's always been talking about how, America's great and powerful and an indispensable nation. So this is foreign to him. He's not built to be a wartime president.
Congressman Adam Kinzinger with us. It's Riley and Scot on WROK. The DHS funding bill is coming soon. It's pending in the Senate. Democrats are filibustering. They won't allow debate. They won't offer amendments on the DHS funding bill. That would also go after the president's executive actions on immigration. Over the weekend, Senator McCain was on NBC and said it would be terrible to let DHS go unfunded past the end of the month. John Boehner on Fox News Sunday said, you know what, we've done our job. The Senate has to act, and said he would be willing to let things slide. AP, the Associated Press, says even if nothing happens, more than 200,000 of the 230,000 employees at DHS will keep working. They're essential employees. So are you willing to let this go? Should Republicans in the House be willing to let DHS go, quote unquote, unfunded at the end of the month?
Well, let me just say this as clearly as I can, and I understand that there's a lot of passion on this issue and a lot of people that are concerned with the president's overreach, and that includes me. I've voted many times to basically punish the president for his overreach. If this government shuts down, if DHS shuts down, we will be blamed for it. Now, we can say that we just need to try harder, fight harder, say more in the media, and all this kind of stuff. I'm going to tell you right now, I'd put all of my money, I don't have a ton, but I'd put it all in the fact that Republicans will take the blame, and we'll be seen as the party that just took control of the Senate and the House and still can't govern. So I think it would be a terrible move. I frankly don't know that we should have picked this ground to fight on, because I actually saw this movie playing out. That played out the last time we had the government shut down. But the Speaker is right. This is now up to the Senate to do something. Ted Cruz, for instance, has always been saying when he was in the minority in the Senate that the House just needed to fight a little bit harder. Well, now Ted Cruz has the majority in the Senate, and he needs to, I guess, just fight harder to try to get the 60 votes or whatever he needs to do. But the Speaker is right. We did our job. We passed our funding bill. We've got to see what can come out of the Senate before we act. We're not going to negotiate with ourselves. The Senate needs to act here. But I think that, especially when you're seeing all the things that are going around overseas, shutting down, or even the perception of shutting down the Homeland Security Department, would be a grave mistake for our party and our country.
A little hypothetical here, I guess, but if Democrats in the Senate are successful, the minority of the Democrat, or the minority party in the Senate, Democrats, are able to push this back and won't allow a bill like one that has passed the House to get through the Senate, and in a way force Republicans' hand to get a bill that they want out of the House and Senate to fund DHS. Are you worried at all about what that means for the next 2 years? Republicans have control of the House and Senate, yet Senate minority Democrats are able to control the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, it of course is. And like I said, my concern, and I said this on your show right when we did it, and I think I actually spelled out what was going to happen, and it looks like it's happening right there. My concern is we didn't pick the right ground to fight on. I mean, it sounds great at the time to say, we're going to be willing to shut down the government over the president's executive order, but if 200,000 of 230,000 DHS employees are considered essential, don't you think the president's executive order, which is funded by fees, is still going to be in place even if the government shuts down? And so that's exactly the case. So, yeah, the problem is we have to fight on the ground that we can actually win on, and a government shutdown situation does not win for Republicans. Why are the Democrats so eager for this to happen? Well, they're eager because they know they're going to be the beneficiaries of it. So, look, the reality is we have the majority in the Senate. All that means when you have short of 60 votes is that you can control what's on the agenda, you can control the fact that there are amendments, but you still have to have 60 votes to pass something. And I'm going to tell you, there's not 6 Democrats that are willing to come along with Republicans and defund the president's executive order. That's just the Constitution. We love the Constitution, and that's how it's written.
There were 60 votes in the Senate. There are 60 votes in the Senate for the Keystone XL pipeline bill that is going to head to the president's desk. What would a veto by the president of that bill, what message does that send to Americans?
I think it sends to America the fact that the president doesn't listen to them. You see this in the war on ISIS. Now you'll see it in Keystone. The vast majority of Americans support this project. It shows that America is not the country that can get things done like it used to. My house in Illinois is right above a bunch of pipelines, by the way. Pipelines aren't a new thing. It's just how we transport energy and be an energy superpower. And it also sends a very strong message that the president's going to be unwilling in his last 2 years in office to work with Republicans on anything. This is a bill that I would have told you probably 2 months ago the president would probably sign just to send some goodwill, but it appears he's not going to. So it's going to be another couple of years of mess, and I think the American people ought to know that the president does not respect their opinions. And he saw that with his executive order on immigration. He violated what the American people wanted, which is a legal solution, not the president just deeming it done. And he's violating their beliefs on energy and energy security. So it's really a sad message, but the president will own the lack of the Keystone Pipeline now. He can't blame anybody else.
Congressman Adam Kinzinger, Illinois 16th District. Now, before we let you go, it's President's Day, and we'd ask you your favorite president, but you get the same answers generally, right? Washington, Lincoln, Reagan, perhaps. So how about this? Through time, your most underrated president, or 2 or 3. Who are the most underrated presidents through time, do you think?
I'm going to say 2 or 3. Number 1 underrated is Millard Fillmore because nobody knows what he really did.
Right.
Or that he was actually president. I'm going to also say George H.W. Bush because I think H.W. was a very good statesman and something that is very lacking today in Washington. And I actually think George W. Bush is underrated. I think history is going to prove him as a man that saw the real threat of terror, and acted. Even if we disagree, people may not always agree with his decision to go into Iraq. In hindsight, I think he saw the terror threat for what it is, and I think history will judge him very kindly for that.
And once again, you just turn your back on James K. Polk.
Polk, what has he done for you lately?
He had the shortest post-presidency of any president. He was only alive, I think, for 106 days after leaving office, James K. Polk.
What was there to do? We were done. We were done. Congressman, as always.
Anymore. Can't keep going on.
That's right. He was tired. Thanks a lot for taking time out of your morning for us.
Of course, guys. It was great. Thanks a lot.